welcome to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck podcast. I am super excited because today we're going to do another RIFF session with one of my dear friends. And I will tell you, when I say RIFF, I mean RIFF. This is completely unscripted, off the cuff, raw, real, gritty. Whenever my guests and I get together, I never know where our conversation is going to go. And so that is part of the magic and the juice. And I cannot wait to see what we end up riffing on today. So before we jump in, let me first welcome my fantastic guest, Cindy Rodriguez, to the table. Hello, Cindy. How are you?
Good, Candy. I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to see what we're going to talk about either, because
I know, right?
Big conversations sometimes.
Well, last time we talked, our half hour turned into what, 2?
Yeah.
So it ought to be interesting to see what comes through. And I am like seriously so thrilled, honored, excited to have you here. Before we jump in, though, I do want to give you a little sense of who Cindy is. She is a media strategist, writer, and speaker. And I'm going to tell you, she is an all-around badass. Of course, she wouldn't be on the show if she wasn't. But she is a badass and a serious force to be reckoned with. She is a PR consultant, founder of Women Breaking the Mold, and co-founder of Results Global Impact Consulting Agency. She specializes in communication by turning experts and business owners into sought-after media authorities. And I will tell you, one of the things I'm going to say right up front, and I will be sure at the end that she shares how, but you need to be following her daily tips on how to get seen, how to step into a bigger way to activate and use your voice. And so she posts some very different perspectives that I think is something that is very needed. And so I think that might be the jumping off point. I want to talk a little bit about using your voice and getting seen. And you do some really specific work in that space. So I guess to start off, tell us a little bit about how you arrived here and how your approach is different.
Wow. So how I arrived here? Well, I was born in Germany. I was.
That's a different story. You're right.
Yes. Once upon a time, we, grew our own crops. So long history of actually working in finance, which most people say, how is that a foray into, doing communications and PR type work? And I'm like, oh, it really is. So I worked in on the brokerage side of the house. I worked in banking. I was a branch manager forever. I worked, and then I transitioned to government finance in the last 16 or so years of my career was on the government finance side. And realistically, communication started with internal comms. Management, part of your ability to, unleash the full potential of your people is your ability to be a good communicator. And that's why we have a lot of poor managers, because you have a lot of poor communicators. And so understanding internal comms. And then when I transitioned to government as a government finance officer, one of the criteria by which you're judged on the satisfactory nature of your budget for local governments, I'm in the state of Florida, is how well your budget serves as a communications device, which is really interesting from a finance perspective. What do you mean? Because I'm putting out a big document with all kinds of crazy high numbers, hundreds of millions of dollars and technical terms and all kinds of things. But the goal was to communicate that information to the public in such a way that they would be able to consume it, do something with it, be able to ask questions for clarification. And then, weekly board meetings where you're standing in front of the board and you're having to deliver information and you're the subject matter expert, but your elected body are everyday citizens who are trying to make the best decisions that they can on behalf of their constituency. And so being able to take really, really high level concepts and put it out in such a way that everybody in the room could understand it and not using, jargon, industry jargon and stuff like that. So it really began my communications journey. So I did a lot of public speaking, and I've spoken all kinds of places. And then, over the years, I had different divisions underneath me, and the communications office is one. So when the mayor's got to take the podium, sometimes he needs talking points. All the time he needs talking points. And direct that conversation. And then the crisis comms kick in, because inevitably they go off script. Imagine that, a politician going off script and saying some wild thing. And as the subject matter expert, you're like, we can't do that. That's not a thing we could do. So you learn really, really well how to craft an angle, a narrative, a story, and how to mop up when something goes awry. And as a constituent, I always appreciate it when the government says, like, we effed up and this is what we're going to do about it. And so for me, that was the thing that I really enjoyed was, okay, how do we communicate to the public what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it? And so there was a lot of angles and narratives. Was I talking to a homeowners association? Was I talking to the chamber, a bunch of business owners? Was I on the Senate floor, lobbying for a bill? Because I've done that too. And now am I on the House floor? Totally different atmosphere in the House and the Senate. So, and you have 1 minute to make your pitch. So really, really working through all of that. And then at a certain point, I decided I wanted to use my financial knowledge and write for publication. So I hired a writing coach. And the first publication I wrote for was the Huffington Post. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fabulous. And I got all these like new subscribers and inquiries. And I was like, oh, we on to something. And then I started eventually working with my writing coach, and we launched a business together, and we were married for a short while. We're just friends and business partners now. And he's a full-time journalist, so he doesn't like take clients per se. He just is a journalist, writes full-time for many, many publications. And for years, we've had a course where we taught other people how to use media to grow their business. And then our approach was always very holistic, right? So I want the business owner to stop trying to talk about their business in a salesy way to a publication. I made a product, and so I need somebody to write about my product. No, nobody cares about your product. So helping the business owner understand that you are an entire person, and all of you gets to come to that pitch, to that publication. So are you like, you're a veteran, you're a female veteran. The angles just go like, they just go everywhere from there, because there's so many different things we can talk about. When someone is connected with you, then they're going to click through, they're going to find out what you do. So for me, I'm really, really passionate about finding out who my client is and what are all the things that make you tick, and how do we use those things to get you media coverage, which we will dovetail into some business coverage at some point.
Sure.
But entrepreneurs, I think too small. They're just like, if somebody would just write about my business, I could make $1 million. And I'm like, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
So now,
well, and it's honestly, it's interesting. So first of all, thank you for that. And there were
Mhm.
things I didn't even know about that. That's really fascinating. But I already have a question that is like bubbling to the surface, because when I hear this and I think about some of the parlays and what I do to help people really get aligned in their authenticity, using their voice, bringing their message from a leadership perspective into the world, there's a lot that we do that's similar. And one of the things I bump up against a lot, and I'm hearing even what you say, is the idea of bringing the comprehensive, the whole person to the table. And where is the balance between bringing your whole self to the table and, for lack of a better phrase, oversharing, dumping your, like, where's the line between, or what's the, I don't even know if it's a line, how, I guess it's a how do you discern between, I'm going to bring my whole self? Because I hear a lot of people when I see things that oftentimes feel, I don't even know, I have no professional words today, gross, icky, feel out of alignment, out of integrity, feel like they're trying to sell too hard. They're like, look at me versus a service place. How do you discern, or how do you walk that line between bringing your whole self to the table and just using platforms, say social media and other things, as a dumping ground for all of your stuff, your baggage, and maybe TMI, too much information that really isn't necessary to bring to the table? First of all, is there a line? Second of all, how, if there is, and I'm assuming I already know the answer to the first part of the question, maybe I don't. How do you walk and discern that line, if there is?
So for me, yes, there's a line. That's the first thing. We're not trying to, parade it all around on the front porch or crazy. Now we want the world to embrace our special brand of crazy, right? But again, this is where strategy comes in. What is the purpose of the story I'm trying to tell? Now, if the purpose is just to sell my shit, then this is not a purpose.
Right.
And I would also caution utilizing storylines that you haven't yet processed fully. I think that's where you see the TMI and the information dump. They're processing it in real time. And so it's coming through from the trauma, not from the healed perspective. And so like I have some stories of some things that happened that I have fully processed. And now I can speak to it from, what were my lessons learned? What were the hard times that I went through? And if there are parts of that issue that I haven't processed, I can allude to those without dumping them out, necessarily all over the place. And so, for, major media, and just for, clarity's sake, we're talking about, like places like Business Insider and Forbes and Entrepreneur, and or being on the local news or local radio station, or being in the local chamber magazine, because again, this is all going to be targeted, industry specific. So depending on, what it is you do and where you're trying to go, drives that strategy around what we're going to pitch, what we're going to talk about, and yeah, your socials don't need to be looking crazy when an editor checks you out either. But I think it's about sharing things that are connecting with the audience, because no pitch is ever going to be about you anyway. It's going to be about the readership of that publication, or if we're pitching a podcast, the listenership of that podcast. What is the takeaway for the audience versus am I just trying to bleh out my crap, because that's not in service. Yeah. So it's always in service, whether I'm pitching a speaking engagement for a client, a podcast, a publication, it's always in service to the intended consumer of that information. And that's where we'll craft. Where would my story be helpful? And if it's not helpful, then we don't need to share that piece. Not that you're not being transparent or authentic. Maybe that piece is on your, private audio vlog that you do for folks who care about that kind of stuff. But it's really, really being specific about who am I trying to help and what do I possess in my totality that brings that to the forefront.
Well, and there's a couple things I want to bring through from that, because I think there's just so much in what you just said that is like fucking awesome. First of all, it reminds me of, I think it was Helen Keller that said once that unless you can tell your story without crying, you haven't done the work to heal the trauma. And I'm paraphrasing, but to that point where, and Brene Brown talks about, there's a difference between vulnerability and oversharing. Oversharing comes from a place of us needing to still heal. And we're dumping that trauma and projecting it out, oftentimes twofold. One, because we want to be seen and we want someone to fix it for us, or two, because we're not willing to step in and do the work and we want it off of us. And so what we do is we overshare in a way to commiserate, because there's a big difference between complaining and commiserating and playing that victim versus connecting and communicating and sharing our truth, right? And so I hear that in what you just said. I also hear the fact that the message, and this is so something that seems like it is so there's two pieces I want to pull out of that. One is this idea that people, I think they might get it sometimes intellectually, but I don't think they actually embody the fact that the message is not about you. It's not about you. It ultimately, you're sharing, and one of the things that it's bringing up, so I have two questions coming through on this. One is the question around what I'm calling performative vulnerability. And I think you and I talked about this a little bit last
we have.
Because there is this space that's been coming through lately when people are like, I'm going to be transparent, I'm going to be vulnerable. And yet there's this very, incongruent aspect, whether it's they're using 27 filters or they're, announcing multiple times how vulnerable they're being. There almost feels like there's a performative nature to that. So the first thing I would like to ask a little bit about is just your thoughts on that and what you see. The other is what happens when we need to pivot in our messaging, and the power of the pivot with the fact that life comes at us. And I know you personally have experienced like massive pivots, which have then changed the way you're choosing to stand in that vulnerability. And one of the things, and the reason why I think you're such a badass, and I've told you this personally, the way you are choosing to show up in your story, especially as the pivots are happening, is like so open and so real and so raw, and you've done your work or doing your work through it. So I feel really connected to it versus some of what I'm seeing as people are pulling those pivots through. So sort of wanting to bridge those two things together, this idea of performative vulnerability and this idea of how do we pivot in the power of the message when needed and when called, that may take us out and have us do something completely different.
Right. And that's a great, and, you know, performative, we see all kinds of performative stuff in the landscape, you know, nowadays. And I think the difference is, like you said, it's about that process. And so, you know, the stuff you're alluding to that I'm going through, you know, some divorce, you know, major surgery, heart condition, all like the great trifecta of life, just, you know, toppled me over. But my goal through that was a conscious uncoupling. And so, which is why we're
Say that
friends.
again. Just say that again, because I love that phrase. And by the way, I'm borrowing that in some things, but say that again, because I think there's an incredible power in what you just said.
Yeah. So my goal through our breakup was a conscious uncoupling. And so I'll tell you what that meant to me. So what that meant to me was the desire to uncouple was not mine. It was brand new to me. And I've written about this, but not publicly, because I had to process through, where did this come from? What did that feel like? All, you know, all of the emotions that come up with this kind of thing. But I knew at the end of the day that we had been friends before we ever got involved romantically. And so we had a very strong base level of friendship. And it was important to me to keep that level of friendship. So my first thought process was, I do not want to onboard new trauma. Mm-hmm. So he divulges he wants to leave and leaves. And my first phone call is to my therapist. First phone call, because I'm like, this thing happened. I do not want to have this stored in my cells anywhere. So I want to work through it in real time as it's happening, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to do this consciously, without, you know, being triggered and emotional and making very poor life decisions that could send me on a whole dark spiral, which was a lot of work. Oh my gosh. I can't even begin to tell you. I've tried out every ounce of liquid in my body more times than I care to remember through this process. Right. But it was important to me that, one, I be transparent about that, because we had a very public joint brand. So people had seen us, because when I started to date, you know, Kamanzi, it was after the death of my husband. Mm. So people saw me grieve my husband. And so when it came time for me to move forward, or however you want to phrase that, I explained some of that publicly, because I had gotten so much support from me and my daughters through the unexpected death of my husband. And it was just this outpouring of support from every corner that I could think of. So I kind of took them on that journey with me. Of course, not 100%, like the pieces that were appropriate to be sharing in a public setting. And so, you know, Kamanzi and I's very kind of whirlwind romance we had. You know, we travel full time, we're global, you know, we've been to all these amazing places, we're going live, camelback from the desert, you know, like people saw our whole thing, you know, people wanted us to live stream our wedding, like it became a whole thing. So when we decided that we were no longer going to be together, we knew how enrolled our fan base was in our relationship. I had people contacting me so upset over our breakup. Like they couldn't process it. They're like, we love us. And I'm like, well, we love each other too. It's not about that. But our journeys, like, no, I mean, breakups don't have to be bad. I think that's another narrative that we go through. So we came together in the time that we needed to be. We did what we needed to do together. And then it was time for us to kind of go our separate ways from a personal standpoint. Now we're still very aligned from a business standpoint, so that works beautifully, and a friendship standpoint. But the romantic side of our relationship was over. And so we publicly announced that, which, was not easy. First we sent an email to our clients so that they would know. And we also wanted to reassure people that, like, your money's still safe with us. Like, you're still going to be able to get all of the services that you purchased, because, people freaking out. And then we've proceeded to have a very public friendship as well. But I've also shared, like, my struggles and how, all of this has affected me. And then, like, all of these health issues that just came out of nowhere, which I know those health issues are related to unprocessed trauma. I'm very aware of that happening. And my body was like, girl, you either gonna deal with this shit or I'm gonna knock
I'm
you
going
out.
to knock you
So
out is what happens, right? Because for type A
Yeah.
personalities that, we
Mhm.
do feel a responsibility sometimes. And so even in the transparency of what you just shared, there's a sense of responsibility. It says, I have to show up for my community in a way that helps
Yes.
them heal as well, right? And so as type A personalities, as leaders, sometimes we carry instead of caring. And there's a
Yeah.
line sometimes that creates sometimes almost a codependency that says, I have to show up high functioning. I have to show up because to your point, I had people reaching out to me saying, oh my God, I don't know how to deal with this. We love you. I'm going through. And so their trauma becomes part of the trauma that you're navigating through and you're trying to present.
Yes.
And your body says, hey, girl, I know you
Hey.
want to take on the trauma of your entire audience, your fan base, your communities that do not know how to react to that. And here's the thing, you need to deal with your shit first. And I know, as someone who really got this in corporate, but even last year taking the sabbatical that was not planned, I cannot stress that sabbatical forced me to take a sabbatical, and it was 9 days in the mountains that became 2 months. And I know you're about to go do a whole soul journey for yourself
Sure
because
am.
it's falling through. Because when the trauma hits in a way that says this is not about you carrying everybody else's stuff that's entangled in this. So I love, 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 love. And by the way, I did borrow this. I'm giving you credit, but the idea of conscious, I want you to hear that phrase, conscious uncoupling. It's a very deliberate, intentional, ownership driven space that says, I know I have work to do, and I am making a choice in every aspect of this process from moment to moment to moment to moment. And I am going to show up as intentionally as I can, as congruently in integrity, because conscious coupling doesn't just happen once. It is an ongoing process.
It's a minute by minute choice, because life is real.
For sure. And if you don't, it says, then girl, I'm going to knock you on your ass, or dude, whatever you are, because if you're not willing to do this especially when we arrive at those higher levels of leadership, and we have done the previous work so that we are more expanded, the separation between our old shadows and our old shit and where we're at, the disparity becomes bigger, that the fall is harder when we don't recognize that yes, for those of you that do not believe, I will tell you time and time and time and time and time again, your body is your best friend that will kick you in your ass and say, I said, sit down and do the work. If not, I'm going to take you out of the game. Period. Right?
Period.
It shows up time and time again where your body's like, and I always think about it. I feel like, and I'm curious as to what you think. I told a group, and I was able to do a retreat here in my home before the pandemic hit, that February. And I remember, and I swear this message was more for me than the people that were in the retreat. But I remember saying, whatever it is you choose to believe, whether it's God, source, universe, we have a group, one of my masterminds calls it Penelope, because people struggle with what to call I don't care, call it Penelope. So Penelope, whatever it is, I feel like anything that is a fire in me, I will be supported, given what I need. I need to trust and surrender, right? Hardest lessons to learn. I feel like my maker, my source, Penelope, it keeps saying to me, dear sweet child of mine, why do you insist on fucking making this so hard? Why do you think you need to struggle at the level of like thinking you need to be alone, thinking that no one's got your back, thinking like you can't ask for help, when all I want to do is give you the kingdom on earth on a silver platter? I really do. And yet instead you make me line up all these universal 2x4s that because you won't listen, I'm gonna cry again. When that shows up, I gotta crack you upside the head and like be like, you're exhausting. You so exhaust me because you make this so effing fucking difficult every freaking time. All right, if you insist, if you want to struggle, I'm not going to interfere with your free will. Here's a 2x4. Here you go. And things like what you're talking about show up.
Away.
I don't know.
It is. I mean, and it is a constant, challenge, and it's a dance that we do. And I've been hit by the universal 2x4 more than I care to admit. And like you said, I want to go back on the high functioning, because, we tend to be high functioning. When someone says you're stressed out, and I'm like, no, I'm fine. My body actually is stressed out. I just don't recognize that because at the level at which I can, hold my water, so to speak, and I can absorb all of the things, and I'm the big energy in the room, I'm the MG, I'm coming in all, big energy, and I'm like, so it's just, I got that fully defined throat chakra, I'm like, I'm gonna say what I gotta say, but I'm gonna do it nice, I'm not gonna hurt nobody's feelings, sometimes, but it was, yeah. So making that choice was really, really, really challenging some days. And I've shared that a little bit lately, while I'm going on my vacation. And I talked about, feeling like my life was shattered because everything changed, my business relationship, my personal relationship, where I was living, we were traveling the world full time. So I didn't even have like a bed to come home to curl up in and cry, and I talked about feeling shattered. And as I pick up those little glass shards, it's like death by 1,000 cuts as I try to figure out like, what is this going to look like and how's it going to go? And walking the line back to the line of what do I share? How do I share it? What is in service to my clients? Because I want to be real. I don't want to pretend like conscious and coupled, like I don't want to do spiritual bypassing. I consciously uncoupled and everything was so great. This is my best friend. And no, like he is my best friend, but was it fucking hard? Yeah. Were there days we didn't fucking talk to each other? Absolutely. Are there times? Well, I took a hiatus as many. I just posted on social. I said, I can't.
Yep.
Like, it's gonna be dark here, and so I'll see y'all in a bit. And I was gone off socials for like a month, I guess. And then I kind of dipped my toe back in, and I was like, y'all, I'm alive, and this is where I'm at, as I'm doing. And that's when I revealed the heart condition that I found out that I had. And so then, so now like people have another piece of the story, right? Like, how'd that happen? So, and now I revealed this location I'm going on, which is just kind of a resuming of the full-time travel life, but now doing it as a single, woman in my 50s whose kids are grown, I'll FaceTime my grandkids and, kisses to them, and just figuring out like, what's next? Because I also want to consciously create what's next instead of defaulting to any story that is attached to a middle-aged woman who can't this, that, who, I don't.
Oh, please, for fuck's sake. Yeah. And what I want to bring through is, because there's a couple things you said, I want to make sure people know what you're talking about. And because you and I, again, so wired similarly, and we share this in common. When you said MG, for some of you that don't realize, that's manifesting generator. And by the way, Cindy is wired similarly to me, where she is a 6-2 manifesting generator, which means we have a throat that is very strong, and we know how to put voice to things and take action and initiative, and we move very fast. And so it's one of the reasons you hear us. We're just, our energy is just like, yeah, right? I see that because one of the things that we've talked about in the past, and it's even some of the work that I have been called to step into, because 5 years ago, before a client even brought this to me, I can remember my client, it was May 2018. And I said this in a video yesterday, that she was like, hey, have you heard? Because, the work we do, we've done a lot of assessments. We do a lot of things to understand. It's part of, actually, when you look at the wiring of a 6-2, it's part of our curiosity. We want to know the experiential wisdom of how we're wired and what we can serve. And we're here to be these role model, these teachers so we want access to the tools. And then there's this, and I love that you're talking about the 2 line, which says, I need to check out and hermit and like I don't want to people and everybody leave me the F alone. There's both sides of it, right? And so when she brought it to me in May of 2018, it was really fascinating because she's like, have you heard about human design? I'm like, yeah, no, it's not for me. Because I was very clear that it was energy. It was this whole like woo-woo, weird, I don't know. I didn't really want to get into epigenetics. I didn't know if I believed that things were coded in your cells and like whatever. And it wasn't until I started to lean in because there was something about, she was a manifestor. So of course she informed and it caused a response in me to take action. That I started going down these rabbit holes that like was one rabbit hole and a rabbit hole and a rabbit hole, which has now been 5 years of rabbit holes and a lot of work that now is that overlays all of my leadership work because I can't not bring it in because you see that. But what's been so interesting about this, and I'm just curious because what I think is also an element of, and I don't want to use the word successful, but I want to use the word impactful, conscious coupling requires a level. And I love the fact that you said, because the other thing that's been really just twerking at me is, I love that you said spiritual bypassing, because I think there's a lot of spiritual shaming going on from people who keep touting how much of their work they've done, and they have to keep getting validated or seen or acknowledged for, I'm a spiritual teacher, I'm awakened, I've done this work, when a lot of that feels like spiritual bypassing. A lot of that feels like that toxic positivity. A lot of that feels like that performative, whatever we want to call it. And because they're not willing to acknowledge their own shadows, which we all have. And the thing is, you don't get past the shadows. The shadows just have layers that you get to keep evolving and expanding through to step more and more into your gifts. But the shadows are always there. This idea that once I've done my work, I'm done. And I'm like, clean. I don't know. I feel like that's there's an aspect of, I got to own my shit on a level that was probably fucking uncomfortable as hell. Like it's going to suck. And sometimes the owning my shit is, there aren't enough tools, resources, meditation, spiritual shit for me to clear the deck. I gotta just sit in the shit.
Yep.
In order to get to a place where conscious uncoupling is even an option.
Absolutely. Because I mean, think about it. The wounds that would come up, abandonment issues, societal conditioning, twin flames, soulmates, blah, blah, blah. Like just all the shit that just comes at you that is just going to be kicked up all of a sudden. And you're like, oh, or just, just as being a woman, and unfortunately, I've gotten the, oh, you just can't keep a man, can you? Like, oh, okay. Like,
shaming and conditioning.
And it's like, wow, okay, how is that helpful? Or, and I agree with the spiritual shaming, like, well, I operate in 5D, so none of this earthly stuff, bothers me. And I'm like, you live in a 3D universe. So
and you just saying 5D doesn't make you 5D, right? I mean, stop.
You came here to live in a 3D universe. And so you do have to operate within the laws of this universal plane. Like, pretend you don't. I see you on social media, trying to gather up likes to sell your course. So yeah, you're operating in 3D plane. So please stop. But yeah, so it's a lot, and so all of these things kind of come at you. And so had I have not done all the work that I have done over the years, yeah, I might have got took out by it. Like the people, and mine, I'll be honest, my abandonment triggers, like, because, my husband died suddenly, right? So completely unexpected. And that has its own set of feelings, and then to have the first relationship that I choose to have post that event abruptly come to an end, again, completely unbeknownst to me, very much kicked up all of that stuff.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, which is, I was like, Maya, hi. I mean, a poor woman, she's on like speed dial and daily texts.
Well, good for you for having a resource to know, because here's the thing I think is really difficult for leaders sometimes. And man, we get the storms coming through, so like the lighting keeps changing. Is the fact that it can be really difficult, especially for some managens. And the sixth is to ask for help and to know where our limitations are. And so to the point where you're like, I know there's deep-seated abandonment. For me, it's deep-seated codependency. I actually have 3 of my 4 prosperity spheres all tethered to codependency as the shadow. And I have one in my relationships, which explains so much. And when I look at and reflect and kind of contemplate that space around my life, and again, this 6, we have our 3 phases, right? And so coming out of some of that observation, when you recognize I have a pattern, I have something that can take me out, I commend you on such a like profound level of the fact that you are aware of where your limitations are and where you need outside resources that don't shame you, that don't condescend or patronize you, but allow you to actually expand more in contemplating and understanding the next level of what that pattern or what that shadow, which can be an incredible gift and blessing, what it's here to teach or offer you, to have you hand that over to help have someone guide you through that process. Imagine what would happen if we collectively, that to me is one of the highest levels of accountability, is to be able to say,
I knew I could fuck it up royal.
I can't do this by myself.
If I just let my emotions run that train, I mean, there's no telling what Rex hazmat spill might have incurred if I allowed that, thing to go off the tracks. I knew I could not. And I was to the point where, so when the abandonment kicks up, the whole betrayal feeling, like, how did I not know you felt this way? Like, what happened? What relationship was I participating in? Like, and one of my shadows is fantasy, so I'm like, oh God, did I make up that relationship in my mind? It was not real, and I didn't want to spiral into my own like nonsense and then start making moves from this very, very hurt place. And so I lost trust for myself, which I posted about self-trust a couple days ago, because I didn't see it coming. So it was like, oh, like, wow, wait a second. Like I'm not as aware as I thought I was, and all things. But again, understanding somebody else's journey is their journey, and this is the path they need to be on. And, sometimes you're collateral damage, and that's just how that works. I did not want to create additional collateral damage. So it was like, yeah, I know I need to call, and I know I need to like have an arrangement that means I can contact you basically pretty much 24/7 from here to 4, because I know I'm just at the start of this, and there's going to be things. And because, I do PR, I do messaging, I do all the things, right? I don't want my clients to feel like they got abandoned and they got let down. And so there was a lot of like tightrope walking going on. And as it goes forward, like I plan to chronicle my soulcation in Costa Rica, process the parts and pieces, and help just give people a glimpse into like, what is my process. And I'll recap the process I've used, because I haven't really shared a lot about that. Because yes, as leaders, I don't want to overshare. I don't want to trauma bond. I don't want to trauma dump. I don't want to do any of these things. I don't want to bypass either and be like, it's all roses and unicorns and everything's fabulous. Like, so on the days that it's not, there's probably gonna be a video of me looking pretty rough saying, it's not fucking good out here today. But I think that's the authenticity that people are looking for, where you're showing both sides of the coin. You're not just this fabulous business owner making some figures and everything is so great. You're showing both sides of that coin, but for me, in a responsible way.
Well, and that's I talk a lot about leadership as a choice, right? It's how you choose to show up. It's how you choose to serve others. It's how you choose to take personal responsibility inside those 2 spaces. And it starts with knowing how to lead yourself. And so it's interesting because I've had some people push back. While I have a different trauma that's been showing up, grieving the loss of my soulmate, my dog, those that get it, those that don't really care. And I've been sharing a lot of that grief journey, because even this morning I woke up literally at 5 o'clock had an image of him and could uncontrollably started sobbing, like just couldn't stop. It's been 69 days. And there's a part of my brain that just heard me say, it's been 69 days. Like there's a space I'm feeling like I should be past, because there's so much conditioning around how we're supposed to grieve. Like my assistant on my behalf one day posted a meme that said something like, you're allowed to grieve as long as it's socially accepted by others. And I'm like, oh, that it even triggered me, knowing that that's the message that I want to put out there, is that we've been damned by this idea that your grief should look like. And to your point, there is such a cry right now, because most people, I mean, most of what you see on social media is track A, right? It's the number one hit singles that came out. It's the best hair day, best makeup, best whatever, best version of bullshit. It's not the truth, because here's the thing. I don't care how much you got your shit together. I don't care how evolved you are. You still are a human living a 3D experience, and life happens and shit shows up. Period. It is called human experience for a reason, right? It's an experience. And so when we're not honest about, today sucked. Today was hard. And here's the choices I had. And I mean, I can remember making a post once that just said, look, it was one of those days I just had to sit in a shit. I tried meditating. I tried this. And finally it occurred to me, it's not about clearing the deck. Stop trying to move through it or push it away. Just let it breathe. Just let it
sit for a while.
Just cry, just whatever. And so this morning, like I cried from 5 o'clock to about 5:40. Probably should have got up at that time, but instead I went and let it kind of wear me out. But I sobbed like as if he left, it was day one all over again. It just hit me again. And I'm like, another wave hit. And you just honor it and say, so you need more breath. So you need to just be. So you having that permission, but there is such a responsibility to say, and this is where I really, it's why I'm really protective about who comes in my circle. And some of that's the two in us. And why I think you and I have connected so deeply, so quickly, because I believe we share this in common, is that space of that responsibility as a leader. If we're going to do this work, that we know there's magic, we know there's magnetism in how we get to show up. It is part of our truth. When you look at our energetic blueprint, when you look at our human design, it is what we're here to do. We're here to teach. We're here to show up. We have an attraction power with a defined throat. I mean, all those things. And it doesn't say put you in a box. It's not, this is who you are. It's you get to make choices. There's always free will. There's always discernment. Yet leadership is always about the choice. It's the choice to say, am I coming from a place where I'm leading from love with love? Am I coming from a place of my deepest integrity, that I'm coming from the best I can at this moment in time, whatever that looks like? And I love that
looks different all the time.
Right. And Don Miguel Ruiz says, one of the 4 agreements is do your best and know that your best changes from moment to moment. My A game is not always my A game, and my A game is not always available. And sometimes my best is binging a Netflix episode and curling up on the couch and like having my mom's dog next to me as I'm grieving, to be like, I'm out. I'm off being the leader for everyone else. Because right now leading me means I need to say no. I need to pull out. I need to understand that discernment. And I think one of the biggest opportunities and the things that's missing so much when we talk about leadership, or we talk about bringing your message to life, to create that opportunity to share. And again, no, it's not about you. It's about what you're trying to impact and move and open up for others. When you take the responsibility for that, it's an entirely different fucking game. It is not, if you want to know, people are always like, how do we get out of this sense of entitlement? It's exactly what you just said. It's I got to take responsibility for the choices I'm making in terms of how I'm choosing to leading myself first, and what that means in terms of how I show up and lead others.
And you know what? And people may not like it. Like, I can't help that. Like my goal is to do no harm, right? As I do my process, but how I need to show up, how I need to grieve, and grief is something I'm intimately familiar with, post the death of my husband, ushering my children through that. So, that's a whole nother, I could probably write a book on what that felt like and what that continues to feel like, because their dad's still dead.
Right.
That doesn't change for them. Like, he was my husband. Yes, 20 years, loved him. But I do get to love again and move on. They don't get to dad again and move on.
Yeah.
Totally different experience. And then to your point of how we operate and how society says, like, I dated too quickly for some, not quickly enough for others. Like, everybody had a freaking opinion on
Right.
or how I helped my kids through it or how I didn't. Everybody, like, people who had not ever walked my walk had lots of opinions about how I should be doing it, which, welcome to the internet. But for me, I think a critical piece I want to hone in on for you is that Don Miguel Ruiz said, yes, your best looks different all the time. But I really, really, really want people to absorb that. Your best looks different all the time, and I feel like, like, I'm very connected to nature, and I know you are as well, which is why we take these sabbaticals out in places that are beautiful in nature, because we got to go, ground in and connect.
Hug a tree.
I do. I'm a total tree hugger.
Oh
I hug the trees every new country I go to, every new city I go to. People might think I'm crazy, but the trees are communicating. That network, they're listen, wisdom. I just can't. That's a whole different episode. But for me, the point there is nature shows us what we need to do and how we can operate best as humans. The seasons change. We are not supposed to be in summer all the time. Florida, I'm looking at you. No.
Yeah, Texas has got that memo lately, just by the way.
The Southern Hemisphere, I'm looking at you. No, but we are not supposed to be in the same season all the time. So when we're showing up as whatever part of ourselves we're showing up as today, we can't expect it to be, Abraham Hicks, the high flying disc all the time. It's not going to be the fucking high flying disc all the time. It's just not a thing. And grief, I know, does come in waves. The most random thing can trigger an episode for me. Here I'm like, oh, it's been 6 years. I've already healed that. No, like, something will happen. And especially through the lens of my children and my grandchildren, who he never met. Like, they've never met their grandpa because he was gone before they got here. Like, that's a whole thing. So when my kids have a milestone and their dad is no longer present in this time-space continuum, to witness that with me as a 3D experience, that can trigger a thing. And so, yeah, that day might be a Netflix binge day and ice cream. And this is what we're doing.
And there is no shame in that game.
Right. And then judging ourselves for how we chose to deal. And I want to be clear, I am not perfect in my spiritual path, even though I have my girl on speed dial and texting her every day. Listen, I fucked some shit up. Like, I just went ahead and was all up in my feels, and I made decisions, and I had to go back.
Cheers to being a hot mess and being human, right? Like,
I had to go back and apologize, because I was like, listen, I know I came for you yesterday. And again, that defined throat chakra, when I come for you,
I come for you.
Well,
that's a Manny Jen throat chakra too, because we got some bold repelling. We come from a place of frustration and irrational anger, and that irrational anger that kicks in, man, it will.
It's not like somebody. I can obliterate someone with my words, and I am very conscious of that. I've done a lot of work around that over the years. A younger version of me didn't really recognize that, but I can literally obliterate you with my words. And through different times in my life, like when I'm trying to be conscious, but like a human, emotions just took over and I came for someone, I've had to double back and be like, so
I'm guessing it's not just your words, but your energy can do it too.
Yeah.
Like, I had someone tell me once, she's like a leader and a mentor of mine said, Candy, you have this incredible energy. You can lift up a room or you can shut it down and you don't have to say a word. And that again is that, like, I can walk in and I love the meme. It's like, look, I don't need to speak. I got a face. Like, I got an energetic aura around me that if I walk in a space and I'm ready to like bust some heads and like throw down, I don't have, my words just amplify it, but I can walk in and take out a room. And I know that, and I've had to take ownership of that, because I remember when she said it to me, my reaction then, I was still in my shit. I was like, that's not fair. I didn't ask for that responsibility. Blah, blah. And she goes, and I remember her words to me. She looked at me, and I was still in corporate at the time. And it was one of the triggers that helped me move out. She said, for someone that keeps wanting to find her purpose and thinks that she's here for more meaningful work, when you cut the bullshit, you'll see it standing right in front of you. And I've struggled. It took me a good 3 years to process that comment. I was pissed. I'm like, how fucking dare you say that? And then I was like, oh, here's the thing. I do not get to be a wallflower. I don't go out to.
We can't operate that way. It's just impossible.
Because my energy, people will say, I felt you before I even heard you speak. I knew you were here. So I know my energy doesn't play small, even when I want to sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm trying so hard.
And I know that there's a power and a magnetism, that there's an ownership. And so I would guess you get that too. It's not just the language of the words, it's the language of your tonality, your energy, the aura that you present, that there's a responsibility that says, I know I'm not in a space. That's when I tell people sometimes, I'm like, look, the best way I can serve you is to not talk to you. Like, you don't want to be in my space because I want to throat punch out of my own body. I guarantee that's not possible. So I'm going to throat punch somebody.
Yeah.
Like, if you're feeling that's
like, I mean, you do, like, I feel it well up, and and same, like, I've now, granted, because of that, I got very good at compartmentalizing over the years, right? Because, corporate leadership as well, I can't walk in doing all kind of this, but people still notice the energy shift because it was a downshift in my vibe, and whether or not people want to admit it, we are energetic beings, and that's just how that works. And I could just shut down a room with my wonderful resting bitch face, whole presence, and like just the walk, like everything changes. And people who are sensitive to that, they feel it. Like, and my ex-husband, he's a projector. God bless him, wide open here. Yeah. I mean, I'm like an AK-47.
He's amplifying all your energy that you're just like,
like, and so he really needed that like alone separation time, because and if you looked at our joint charts, there was no open channel, 100% full.
Wow. Which means when you were aligned, it works really well. Yes. When you're not, there's a shit ton of friction.
I mean, and so, and because I'm the big energy, I remember being pissed off with my coach about, well, I'm sorry, his weak ass can't handle it. That sounds like a him problem. But like, I had, as the big energy, you do have to manage it because it's just out here doing what it does.
Well, you walk around with this energy that literally the two things that my coach kept recently, she's like, you need to let go of that. My two favorite phrases, and I wear these phrases, is what the fuck? And are you freaking kidding me? What is wrong with people? Like, what is wrong with you? Are you kidding me right now? What the fuck? Like, I literally have an energetic, and it's one of the reasons I have this constant
because all the what the fucks, I'm with you.
My consternation around, I can't. Like, are you fucking kidding me? And she's like, you've got to release that energy. Because that energy is taking out, right? And this was a couple of years ago. I really had to sit with the fact that is and it's oftentimes unconscious, because I'll be like, I'm good, right? I'm optimistic. It's that positive talk. I'm like, I'm good. Let's go. And not realizing, and again, even as a manifesting generator, there's, we respond to things and we respond quickly, and then we take action, but we miss a step for Manny Gens. That's part of where this energy comes from. We got to take pause to inform what our plans are, or what we need, or how we're feeling, or
we're switching lanes.
That's not about you, or oh my God, I need you to do this for me. We miss that step because we're moving so fast. That step, I love, because when you see it, they're like, oh, manifesting generators, they respond and initiate. I'm like, they respond, inform, and initiate. In that space, for me, takes me out. Still does. I've done a lot of work to take a breath. And that's my space when I am all guns a-blazing. Okay, I'm going to be compassionate. My phrase is, I'm going to practice patience, compassion, kindness, and grace. Compassion, patience, compassion. So that I take a breath, and I'm not like, ooh, my energy has gotten bigger than my brain can connect, because that's the other thing that happens. I can't even bring reasoning in because my energy has taken over.
Yep. And so, well, how do you know? I just know. I know what I know. Like, one, I'm sacral authority, so I know what I know. Don't
Yep.
And but yes, my slow down, inform, take responsibility for that, because, I'm responsible for the energy I put out.
For sure.
And for a while it's the same. I was like, well, if it's good energy, what the fuck, you're welcome. But
if it's not, get out of my way, right?
You better move. Like, you better move, because like, I'm coming through like a damn freight train who's gone off the tracks, and I'm just, but yeah, but and sometimes it's like the full-time damn job managing my energy, because I'm like, I have to check myself constantly, like, where am I coming from? And it's so funny because I'm seeing this play out in real time. My granddaughter is a Manny Gen. And so as I watch her developing, she's only 3. And of course, so she's very much living in the pure of it all, like, and to watch her go from this to this to this, or to have her come, woof, like she will come, she'll just go.
Yep.
It's like, I just had to get it out. And I'm like, you go, baby, get it out. Like,
get it out. Yes, because you don't want that shit getting stuck in your body.
And she'll be like, angry. And I'm like, good. All right, we have words for our emotions. I like it. I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? Are you still angry? Yes. I'm like, what do you want to do? Run. Okay, what are we gonna do now? And then after a while, I'm like, do you feel better? Yes.
I'm like, okay. A boxing gym in my garage, legitimate. That is mine, because running, my body doesn't like running, but it's I need to swing at something, and I need to get that, because that's the thing people don't understand. It's not that just by acknowledging it, you're going to make it go away. It's I need an outlet to release it so it doesn't get stored in my body, because then that's where the trauma kicks in and it takes us out and it does the thing, or we project that energy to other people. It's like, you know what? I'm going to be 5 minutes late to that meeting. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to go in my garage and like swing as hard as I can. Come back. I might be a little sweaty, but I promise I'll be present.
Yep.
I need to get it
out. And my projector daughter pointed out to me today, because I struggle to sleep sometimes, or a lot of times, most of the time.
Of course you do, your Manny Gen. We could have a whole nother episode on why Manny Gens struggle to sleep.
But we were talking about like the 2 piece of me, the 6-2, where like I withdraw, and she's like, you just need to get all of your energy out during the day so that you go to bed exhausted. And I was like,
that's exactly right. You need to mentally and physically, I'm just going to say this as a Manny Gen and someone who teaches this work, you are going to need, wait a minute. You are going to need to physically and mentally get that energy off on a daily basis. The other thing for a manifesting generator we need to do is go to bed before we're actually tired, which means sometimes we need to be in bed reading or doing something, because that if we wait and we're like, no, I'm just going to push through, then that second wind kicks in, and it's at least 90 minutes of our brain and our generator in it, and like we're pulling from our motor centers, and we're like, holy shit, now I'm going to solve world hunger, and now I'm going to do this, and oh my God, what's the thought? And like, because we didn't let ourselves wind down. We need to get all that energy out every day. And then we need to put ourselves to bed before we're tired, so that when that shows up, we can put it away and just go to sleep. The problem is most Manny generators push through it. I'm speaking from experience.
Well, and she was funny because she said it this morning.
5 more minutes becomes a 2-hour fight that I can't close my eyes, and then I'm waking up repeatedly, and now I've got things I'm thinking about. Now I'm not sleeping because now that's giving me something else to worry about, and it becomes this endless loop of la, 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 and I wake up and I'm like, why the hell did I even try? I think I slept an hour last night.
Yep, same. And that was like me this morning. I was like, I think I slept an hour, maybe 2, like if I'm being generous, and not consecutively. And she was like, projectors right there. She took that as an invitation to tell me what about myself with their wisdom of my projectors. And I was like, you're right.
But it's fascinating when you understand that. And by the way, we're going to have to do another episode, because we're already getting on, like, this is probably a 2-parter in itself. Because I want to talk more about that power. I love. I didn't even realize how much or how deep you had, dug into understanding that for your children as well. There's so much power, because one of the things I do, and it's been really interesting, because for someone who was like, that's just woo woo, I'm not getting in that space. And then I realized it's physics. It's actually quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and holy crap. Then my engineering brain went, wait a minute, this is actually fascinating. And then you could map things out, and it's just cool. doing it, I do this work with leaders, right? And we do it within their leadership teams, we do it within organizations. And like even understanding the nuanced differences between a manifesting generator and a projector, because they can have a magical relationship or they can have a holy shit. Like, first of all, because a projector has a lot of wisdom they like to bring to the table. Yet if they are not invited, especially for a Manny Gen, they will piss us off because a manifesting generator does not like to be told what to do. I'm just going to tell you, if you have a Manny Gen in your life, don't ever offer them advice if they didn't ask for it. They will shut you down and they will burn a hole in you, and that energy will get really big and they'll be like, fuck off. I'm just saying. However, when I ask for it, a projector brings like incredible, that I'm like, I didn't see it that way. They can see around corners, they can see the big picture. But if I didn't ask for it, if I didn't invite you to share that with me, man, that creates like, I'm going to take you out. And then the projector feels like they're not seen, and it becomes this really just shitty energy. And so even understanding that, because we have this culture, and what kills me, and this is probably one of the reasons I find it most fascinating, we have this culture that's all around achievement, accomplishment, success. And even though a projector's signature success, it's not success like what we've been programmed. That's 20% of the population at best has a success signature. The rest of us are here for satisfaction, for peace, for health, for like nothing about how much shit. I remember in my corporate days, and you need more stuff. For what? You need to produce more stuff. For what objective, what point? It's not about, it's about, we have such a quantity output. It's not about a quality outcome. And to understand that and be able to think, oh, my kids are different. I can raise them because, you know, everything says human design was created for the generations coming in right now, right? We're shifting this energy. I just think it's fat. Anyway, I'm going way down a rabbit hole. Again,
it's made a huge difference in understanding how to relate.
It's fascinating that you've mapped it out for your kids, because my guess is, and I can hear it in what you're saying, how you approach your kids about things is very different.
It's very different. My one daughter is a generator. The other one's a projector. There's no way I can come at them the same way. And both my grands are Manny Gens. So, you know, they're a lot, which is cute to watch, because I'm like, ooh, the evolution of a Manny Gen. Wow, look at this. This is an interesting experiment. And I don't teach it or anything. I just, my therapist, you know, slash coach, this is the work that she does. So like, you know, she's been able to help me navigate, you know, I've gone to shadow work retreats with her to like work through the gene key shadows. And
I love that stuff.
Know a lot for myself, because it's the filter through which I try to navigate, because it's helped me have less shame, because I understand my own wiring. And I'm like, instead of saying, well, that's just how I am, I'm like, no, that is how I am, but I am at choice about how I present this.
And there's also, so there's that, because I love that, because we have a whole language that says one of two things. This is who I am, just deal with it. Very fixed mindset, which doesn't serve shit. So there's no ownership. There's no like accountability there. There's no responsibility. Or we have the space that says, oh, you know, there's an excuse. There's the whole victim side of that says, well, this is my shadow. This is what it is. This is forever. Or we do the space where we can get really curious and go, wow, I have choices, especially in our open centers, right? That's like fascinating work, to say, oh, I have choices and I have permission to realize there are certain things that are never going to feel right for me. For example, I am not here to be someone that has a certain logical linear way of thinking. It's just not going to happen for me. I have a wide fucking open head and ajna. Like there is not a single gate even remotely lit up. I am wide open, which means to give myself permission to say, there's likely not going to be one way something can happen for me. And I'm going to struggle sometimes with too many possibilities, but to allow myself permission to say, okay, I'm not wired that way, and that actually is a good thing. I don't want to change that because I'm not here. And this is, again, a whole nother subject we get onto, the whole comparisonitis that we get into. And it's funny, I was listening to Atlas of the Heart from Brene Brown yesterday on my walk, and she was talking about how she used to look over with other swimmers and sometimes would find herself competing with a 20-year-old pro-Olympic swimmer in the pool. She's like, oh my God, I almost threw my shoulder out trying to compete. Over. She could say, probably think I'm weird because I'm in the water and I'm mouthing. you have a good swim. You go, you swim. And now all I want to do is remember, she goes, I took a picture of my lane. I took a picture of my swim lane so that I remember it's my lane. I'm not supposed to swim like the person next to me. And I think for me, that was one of the most beautiful gifts I got when I went into the nosedive, was the fact that it gave me permission to realize I'm not supposed to fit in a box, mine or anybody else's. And I have permission to realize I'm not here to do what everybody else has done, which isn't that, I mean, and that's what you're pulling through to bring this full circle so that we can kind of like, we'll have to set up another time. But that full circle of where we started around how you're helping people create that wholeness around getting their message out, right? It's, I'm gathering a lot of your work is stop trying to sound or look like someone else. Your strategy is very different.
Yes. And it's like, okay, how can we bring your message? What about what you do helps the person you're trying to serve, the podcast you're trying to be on? Like just pulling them out of the, PR is not about you. And people think it is. And no, it's not. It's not about you. Good PR is not about you. It's about communing with your stakeholders, whether that be internal or external. How do I serve the stakeholders with what I do? And it's like, let's, and I love when we can get into that because, there's just, we talk about the no like trust factor. Well, if we start bringing you to your PR coverage, that's where the no like trust factor is going to evolve and come in. Now, do you still have to have a good product? Yeah, of course. But just having a good product is just not enough.
Because people pay to be in your energy. And this is the thing I don't think people understand. And I want people to know how to get into your energy, into your field, how to find you, because this is the opportunity. And regardless of what path of how you figure that out for yourself, ultimately you're attracting other energy to you. It's an invitation for people to be in a container of your energy, whether it's through your product, whether it's through your message, whether it's through a mastermind, your coaching, whatever you're doing. It's people are paying first and foremost to be in a container of your energy, because your energy, when you're aligned as fuck to it, you have specific energetic codes that naturally connect your soul level people, because there is an activation you create that actually is way beyond the programs and the services you offer. There is a space. It's why when like Cindy and I met, like we were like, I love you, but I don't know why. We met in a group and like literally could not love each other. I just knew she was my person. She's my girl. She's a soul sister. She's a total fucking badass. And I knew it because she didn't even have to say anything. There was an energetic code that just, our energies aligned. And that's how beautiful it is when you're standing in that space to do that work, to do the conscious uncoupling, to do the space around your own responsibility, to own it and show up to, like you said, the fullness, the wholeness of who you are. I mean, God, imagine what we could do if more of us would step in that space, right? And I think it's why you and I do this work, because we know we see the possibility.
Oh, yeah, the possibility
to choose to step in those containers with us. So I'm curious. I mean, I know, but other people want to know, how do they work with you, find out about you, dig into your work, be in the container of your energy? How do they find you?
They can find me on socials at Women Breaking the Mold is my handle on most socials. On Facebook, I think it's just my name, Cindy Rodriguez. Go to my website, rgicai.com. Connect, go and email us, flip a call, whatever. DMs are open. So happy to connect.
Yeah. And I like I said at the beginning, please, please, please connect with her on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Her posts are powerful. If you are really considering, if you feel called, that you have a message, that you have a story, that you need something that you know is going to impact, as I like to say, the 3 I's: inspire, impact, and influence others, reach out to Cindy, because the way she can help you create a strategy around that is fucking mind-blowing. And so I really cannot stress that enough. This is not, stop thinking you need to do things on your own. We all have gifts and we all have a wheelhouse for a reason. So just know that is her genius. And I say that like with the utmost admiration and respect. Her genius is this space of just pulling out that message. I watch what she does. I watch how she does it. It's fucking awesome. So That being said, two things. One, please, 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 please come back and let us do another.
Of course,
conversation.
anytime.
I love the Play Spaces with you. To everybody that has joined and is listening, thank you so much for being in this conversation with us. I know there are some powerful takeaways. I hope you will let whatever needs to be with you, marinate, contemplate it, move it forward, because it really comes down to your ability to say yes to yourself and quiet down or destroy the noise getting in the way. And Cindy, before we close, do you have any last thing you would like to share?
I just want to say, when you're going to approach all of these things, I want you to start with curiosity for what's happening, then apply some creativity to the things that you found out in that curiosity session, and wrap it all in compassion. Can't go wrong.
And you know what I love about that? That is the absolute definition when you look at the energetic work around contemplation. It is around curiosity, creativity, and compassion. So with that, your invitation is to contemplate and to take that with you and continue to move into space that aligns you in a way where you feel aligned as fuck. Thanks. This is Candy. Thank you, Cindy, so much for being here. I love you. And we will catch up with all of you on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.